Hello, my name is Chris Noroski, and I am here today to share with you my concerns regarding the troubled teen industry. I will be talking about my own experiences attending the Family Foundation School, a therapeutic boarding school in New York. I am very concerned by the lack of government regulation of the troubled teen industry, especially since child abuse and death in many of these facilities has been well documented. I attended the Family Foundation School from November 2001 to December 2004 from age 15 to age 18. I would like to quickly share with you a few pieces of my family history because I feel they are relevant to understanding my story. Before I start, I would just like to say that I love and care for my family very much and that I am not divulging this information lightly, but only because I think it is helpful to understand the insidiousness of how many therapeutic boarding schools' marketing strategies sell hope to desperate parents. They try and tell the parents what they want to hear, whether their child is struggling from depression, eating disorders, sexual disorders, drug addictions, gambling addictions, you name it, they will claim to cure it. Anyways, both my mother and father had been hospitalized for psychiatric disorders. In fact, that is where they met a few years before I was born. My mother was struggling with depression, and my father is paranoid schizophrenic. I've had no contact with my father as my mom left him shortly after she became pregnant with me. My father can be violent and has been in and out of mental institutions for the past 20 years. As a child, I grew up with just my mom, and I was an only child. When I reached adolescence, I was defiant and rebellious towards my mom to a bigger extent than to most kids my age. I was angry and bitter, and I showed this by being very verbally abusive towards my mom. I told her I hated her and wish she were dead. I also spat my mom's face and blocked the doorways to leave the house. I also am ashamed to admit that I slapped my mom across the face. I cut school quite a bit, claiming to be sick, and had a very big anger management problem. I punched several holes in my bedroom wall. I was in need of some serious help. I was hurting and I didn't understand why. My mom tried sending me to a couple of therapists, but I would refuse to talk and try to act crazy so they would leave me alone. When I was 15 years old, and after displaying these actions for a year or so, I was woken up at 4 a.m. by two men who proceeded to handcuff me, shackle me, and put me in the back of a Lincoln Town car. I had no idea who they were, where I was going, or why. I was a scrawny 15-year-old scared kid. I was on my way to 3 years of hell. During my time at the family school, I witnessed many things that I would consider to be child abuse. You were not allowed to talk to your family until you had been at the school for 30 days. A few days before I was scheduled to get my first phone call, I refused to go to school until I was able to talk to my mom. They told me that wasn't going to happen and made me stand in the corner of a room facing the wall all day and did not feed me anything. While I still refused to go to school, two staff members then picked me up by my neck and held me against the wall in the corner of the room while yelling obscenities at me. I was then slammed over a table, which proceeded to fall on top of me. I was then pinned to the ground by two men, one of whom was at least 300 pounds. It should be important to note that I made no physical advances or threats on either staff member. I just said I was not going to comply with their demands until I could talk to my mom. I attempted to behave myself for the next several days until I could talk to my mom. I had to promise staff I would not say anything bad to my mom on the phone, but as soon as I get on the phone, I told my mom what happened to me. I told her, please just make the drive up here. If I'm lying, you never have to talk to me again. The staff member immediately took away the phone and reassured to my mom that I was lying while looking at me in my black eye just a foot away. My mom never came, and I was never allowed to talk to my mom for several months after that. I was told that if I didn't change my ways, I would end up a psycho like my father. I was told that my mom was afraid I was going to be like my father and didn't want me anymore. I only recently learned that my mom never felt that way. These statements are terrible. They knew my insecurities and knew how to make me fearful of them. They knew I was insecure around girls, so they made me feel like a pervert. They knew I was scared of my father's illness, so they focused on that as my future if I did not convert to their fanaticism. Being stubborn, I refused to admit that I needed to work their program of recovery. During my first few months there, several staff members tried to get me to admit to problems that I did not have, such as drug and alcohol abuse, two things I had never tried at all in my life. They even questioned me as to whether I had been sexually assaulted by a family member. The school also had a very strict anti-masturbation policy. On several occasions, I was forced to get up in front of the family, a group therapy session where a student stands up in front of 30 peers and 5 to 10 staff members, and people take turns telling you what is wrong with you. Students were encouraged to call me a pervert, and girls told me that I was a disgusting person because I masturbated. All of this was discussed over meals. It was an embarrassment and public humiliation that no human being deserves. Male students were discouraged from talking to female students. Some boys got in trouble for as much as making eye contact with female students. Smiling towards the opposite sex was strictly prohibited, and thus I had no female friends at the school. Prior to the family school, I had just one girlfriend in my life. Since leaving the school 4 years ago, I would say that has been one of the most lasting effects. Being able to reopen myself around the opposite sex and realizing that being attracted to girls is not a bad thing. I don't have to fear standing in a corner or not being fed if I smile at a cute girl. And so 3 years of my formative teenage life in terms of dating and maturing as a person were taken away from me by the family school. A lot of the policies at the family school exist to demean the students. They seek to destroy a student's will to fight by making you feel worthless. It is no surprise that one student, while I was at the family school, committed suicide. While I did not know the student, Tom M., personally, he committed suicide after a short time at the school. I cannot say that I blame the family school for that because I did not know him well, but I do remember that the first time was the hardest time. The first month was the hardest time at the school, that I also entertained suicidal thoughts while I was first there. I never seriously considered it, but the thoughts came into my head. And the family school is also a NATSAT program. Mr. Lewis was talking about the program he sent his son to. It's also affiliated with this. Some of my peers at the family school were certainly very dangerously at risk. There were students who were facing 20 years or more in prison if they did not complete the family school. Others were sex addicts who had abused siblings. Others had been sexually abused by siblings or family members. And others were very suicidal and extremely depressed. All these students were lumped together into one therapy group. I cannot remember a single individual therapy session with a licensed therapist during my 3 years there. $40,000 to $60,000 a year, and no regular one-on-one therapy. Did they even care to understand my life, or how I needed help? Or were they just there to convince my mom to keep me there longer? The main issue that I have with these programs, the family school in particular, is their false marketing strategies. They claim to be a college preparatory boarding school. I don't think I could have been worse prepared for college than I was by the Family Foundation School. I was confused, and by the time I graduated, I half thought I was a drug addict and alcoholic, even though I had done neither in my life. The lies I told to get by and finally escape that place still haunt me today. I fought the family school system for 2 years. The result, I was placed on work sanctions on 10 different occasions. Kat was touching that briefly. These sanctions lasted between a week and 2 months in my case, and consisted of menial labor all day with no formal education. I was taken out of school to do tasks such as carrying buckets of rocks from point A to point B all day, and then the next day carry the same rocks from point B to point A. I also built drainage ditches, resided parts of the campus, and during the summer was given a manual lawnmower and sent into the 100-degree heat all day. These sanctions were 7 days a week from the moment we woke up, 6:15 a.m. Work usually began around 8:30 and lasted until 7:30 at night. I would approximate that I missed 6 to 9 months of formal education doing this type of labor. Family Foundation School boasts a 100% college placement rating. I cannot count the number of times where students were told, if you do not go to college, you will relapse and die. I wonder if that 100% counts as students who walk out of the abusive program at 18 because they would rather live on the streets than suffer physical and mental abuse. I wonder if that 100% counts for students who commit suicide both at the school and shortly after leaving. I wonder if that 100% counts students who choose to cut themselves at the family school because they are convinced that they would rather be in a psychiatric ward than at the healing environment of the family school. I wonder if that 100% counts for students who drop out of college because their lives are such a wreck from their experiences of abuse. My main concern today is not for those of us who have been thick-skinned enough to eventually shrug this off and walk forward, nor is it necessarily to bring these wretched programs to justice. My concern is for today's youth who are at this very instant jailed without a trial against their will in these facilities. This is for my fellow classmates who are still haunted by their experiences who are unwilling to come forward, and all they can do is send me a private email saying thank you. Once I left the family school, I tried to tell my mom what was happening, but she would not believe me. She called me a liar and said I was just bitter for her sending me there. Only until the recent congressional hearings has my mom said that she was sorry and she not realizing what was happening there. She didn't want to believe what was happening there, and who could blame her? I'm no longer bitter or angry personally about what happened to me there. If anything, I'm a bit sad. I'm a senior at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota, where I'm pursuing a degree in science and math for elementary education. I believe I have found a career and a purpose that I can find meaning and inspiration in. I want to protect our nation's children and be an integral part in being a positive influence rather than a demeaning influence, even if it is just in one classroom. It is my hope that as this issue gets more public exposure, that more and more youth will come forward to tell their stories and demand change in this industry. Thank you for taking the time to consider my story.